Greetings gamers, I'm Gav, and welcome to another Last Epoch video. Today I'd like to talk about the state of Last Epoch overall following patch 1.1, Harbingers of Ruin. I'll give a brief history and background on 11th Hour Games, and how the game has progressed starting from the launch of 1.0 to where we're at today. I'll sprinkle in my thoughts and experiences so far as well regarding 1.1. We'll close it out with some improvements I hope to see with patch 1.2 and beyond. While I'll strive to remain objective, be aware of my biases. My perspectives here are from that of a Circle of Fortune player and a rogue main. And after nearly 1,000 hours of gameplay, hundreds of which were spent unraveling the lore and retelling it here on my channel, my love for Last Epoch runs deep. As a longtime casual Path of Exile player since Breach League, I've played my fair share of Zizaran builds. Ziz sold me on Last Epoch all the way back in 2021 with his review.
Hi, Zizaran here, and I wanted to make a quick review or commentary or whatever about a new ARPG called Last Epoch. For those of you that aren't familiar with me and my channel, what I do before doing any sponsored playthrough is, well, first of all, I'll never sign a non-disparagement agreement, which means that you can't say anything negative about the game, and I will always make sure and ask, can I say negative stuff about the game and can I criticize this? And that's cost me quite a lot of sponsorships. However, Judd, the CEO of 11 Hour Games, had the best reply of any sponsor so far, where he said, Ziz, you can roast the game on stream if you want, even with me in the call. If there's something wrong with our game, we want to know about it so we can make it better.
Well, Judd, EHG, and Last Epoch friends, I won't be roasting the game too hard, but I do have a few negatives to bring up in this video. While I didn't play much in the alpha and beta stages of the game, I followed the updates EHG was making and their philosophies, and waited for it to be enough to pull me away from Path of Exile and World of Warcraft.
And you?
Last Epoch.
We will watch your career with great interest.
I'm a patient gamer. Fast forward 3 years and here we are. I have a solid perspective on the gameplay loop with several successful homebrew builds, passing 300 corruption in both patch 1.0 as well as this patch. I've also downed 10 out of 10 Harbingers during this patch, which from what I'm hearing is pretty good for a casual. While we will be talking briefly about player retention numbers and showing some charts later in this video, it's not to make some wild claim that a seasonal game such as this one is suddenly dead with no hope. Quite the contrary. My sentiments towards the future of Last Epoch are actually very positive. I'm just frustrated with the current patch and state of the game, and it seems others are as well. In most cases, all any seasonal game like this needs is a few months of solid development and a banger patch to bring players old and new back. EHG is still held in a very positive light by the community inside and out of Last Epoch. They just have a lot of work to do on their game, but I believe 100% that they're up to the task. The amount of energy EHG exerts for this game and the amount of direct communication you can receive from them is actually insane. All of their employees are active in the official Last Epoch Discord, as well as on Reddit and the official forums. You can ask EHG Mike, the co-founder and lead developer, direct questions on their dev philosophy or the mechanics of Last Epoch, all in their official Discord, and he'll usually get back to you very quickly, in real time. There's no red tape for their communications, and I love it. And if that's not enough, you could just catch Mike every Friday evening live on Twitch.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another Last Epoch dev stream. As usual, I'm your host, Mike. Hi, how's it going, everybody?
Mike plays Last Epoch and answers your questions straight from Twitch chat about the game and its development. It's mind-boggling how passionate and just how overall nice of a guy Mike is. And his beard is absolutely brilliant.
All right, a last question for me. For anyone who is trying to start to grow out facial hair, what tips do you have for them?
It's going to be itchy, so get used to that. Get a beard comb, which I'm plugged into with headphones, and I will rip them out if I go get it, but just a simple, basic wooden beard comb. Shower, wash it, keep it clean, and get some really simple oil. You can get some jojoba oil. It's like jojoba, and that's a carrier oil that's super cheap, and you get 3 drops of bergamot and other things like that. You can make it smell nice, but
Answering game questions and beard questions with pride. What an absolute treasure. I might need to pick up some of that jojoba oil. EHG conducts forum polls for the community to directly weigh in on the difficult or messy development situations that they run into, or polls for content additions that they're considering adding to the game. They even share the results of these polls with everyone and explain why they're making the impactful decisions that they're making, how split the room or community was on it, etc. It's like EHG and us as the community are making the game together.
And we take a lot of suggestions that the community makes in how we should be developing or altering the game. And I've always thought that's very important, because you want to listen to the people that are playing your product for hundreds of hours. They know it better than even sometimes and oftentimes we do.
Judd's entire goal in starting this project, and something I'm sure his team shares, is that they just want to make a great game. A game that they wanted to see in this genre, not strictly what will provide them with the most financial gain or popularity. 11th Hour Games is absolutely killing it with their communication and candid demeanor, creating a wonderful community feel that I haven't had since those early MMO days. Overall, I have a lot of positive things to say about 11th Hour Games and the community of Last Epoch, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like every game, it has its flaws, and I have my gripes. Let's talk about the launch of 1.0 and provide some history and context to the lead-up of patch 1.1, Harbingers of Ruin. February 21st was fast approaching, and Last Epoch was already boasting over 1 million copies sold on Steam pre-launch. The game was poised for a spectacular turnout on day 1 of patch 1.0.
Hello travelers, my name is Judd Kobler, Game Director for Last Epoch and founder of 11th Hour Games. I want to welcome all of our new community members joining us for the official launch of Last Epoch, and give a huge thank you to all of you who have been with us throughout early access. Because of your tremendous support, we're launching a game that was just a dream not too long ago, and we're extremely excited to share it with all of you. Last Epoch began as an after-hours passion project founded by a Reddit post in 2017. A group of us ARPG enthusiasts banded together and set off on our dream to create the next great loot-based action RPG. This was to be a game made by us players who were passionate about the genre and would always listen to the community that plays these games as their hobby, because that's who we are too. That was a pretty lofty goal considering we had absolutely no funding. The majority of our early founders had never worked in the games industry, and we were mostly just die-hard action RPG fans wanting to ensure that our hobby had a bright future. Through Kickstarter and the support of our incredible community, we've grown from a development team of just 5 or 6 to over 90 people from across the world who've banded together through a love of collecting loot and building awesome heroes. Our unconventional studio has been able to achieve things that typically require much larger companies, and I attribute that to our team's intense collective desire to make the next great action RPG, the game that we want to play as fans for all of us.
Things were looking very good for the studio. On top of the highly anticipated and innovative trade faction system being implemented, this patch would bring the final 2 mastery additions to the game as well, the Falconer and the Warlock. 1.0 ushered in new and interesting uniques for additional ways to express skill diversity. It brought impressive new visuals and UI improvements, and so much more. Both the team, the community, as well as the entire ARPG scene was excited for the launch of the game. However, the game had some very troubling server stability issues with its launch. NA and other regional server issues were resolved within 2 to 3 days post-launch, while EU West suffered off and on for about a week. The game did launch with an offline mode, which was completely removed from the cycle servers, but containing all the same content to play at your leisure completely independently. So the game was technically playable the entire time, but the consumer outcry for a functional product online was loud and clear. Perhaps a bit too loud and clear, and shall we say, passionate. Frustrations are merited 100%, but never to the degree some of those frustrations escalated to. Slowly but surely, the servers and infrastructure were built up and became stable, even with over 200,000 concurrent players at peak times. And on February 25th, Last Epoch peaked at over 264,000 players online concurrently, a massive achievement for 11th Hour Games, placing Last Epoch at number 41 on Steam's rankings for the top 50 all-time concurrent player counts. Overall, the patch was great once everyone could log in and play. On Easter weekend, however, further disaster struck the fresh economy of the Merchants Guild. A player was frustrated with EHG's slow actions to fix a gold dupe, an issue that they had found and reported. Due to the player's impatience and weird way of venting that frustration, they childishly posted a video of them performing the dupe online. I don't know where it was posted initially, but like all things on the internet, it spread. The dupe was out for any bad actors to take and recreate. The Merchants Guild economy was wrecked overnight. Here's Frozen Sentinel explaining a bit about the situation.
This was the exploit. This comment sums it up pretty well. So it wasn't exactly duping. There was an interaction that you could do between 2 players where putting in negative numbers and then completing the trade would instantly get you potentially billions of gold. So this is pretty problematic. It's very, very fortunate that EHG has fixed this, because this is huge, huge damage to the player economy. So if you're wondering, that's basically what was happening.
If you want to watch that full video, I'll have that linked down in the description. I played the entire cycle of 1.0 from start to finish as a COF enjoyer, and avoided all of this drama luckily, but it definitely impacted the Merchants Guild players and invalidated a lot of their progress. And the economy of a game like this, especially when it's player-driven, is the lifeblood of that game. In an interview that Josh Strife Hayes conducted with Chris Wilson, CEO of GavrynGaming, when asked a question about the struggles of Amazon's new title, New World, and the launch woes that they experienced leading to its rapid decline in players, Chris had this to say about how pivotal the economics of a game are.
But there was one consistent theme with a lot of the problems that really irked me there, and that was the idea that there were economic exploits occurring that were difficult and slow for them to fix. Rollbacks didn't come at the right times and so on. And this really undermines the trust that people have in a game, because we play a game to make progress, especially an online game. We're playing with our friends to get better stuff than them, to level up faster, to have more gold, to have better items. And in a game where progress is literally how you're measured and what you're working on, the ability for someone to cheat their way to faster progress, you go to sleep looking forward to playing tomorrow, and when you come online, everyone's got 10 billion gold and an entire town each because there was an exploit while you were asleep. That's not fun. And so it's critical in the launch of a game to make sure that the economy is sacrosanct. And personally, if I was launching a game and there were that many problems in it, I would just take it back into beta, do whatever it takes before doing a big wipe and having a launch that was stable, where players' progress is actually reliable and tracked properly.
The decline of players for Last Epoch continued even further after just 1 month of release. Thankfully, the bad actors were all banned relatively swiftly and permanently. EHG has a very firm stance against exploits, as they should, but it was just another tragic launch woe. How much of it could have been avoided, I'm not sure. That same weekend, Path of Exile's patch 3.24 Necropolis League was released as well, further siphoning off Last Epoch players. My personal biggest complaint in 1.0 was that the endgame was a bit lacking and samey after a while, which was actually one of the biggest complaints from everyone seemingly. And EHG knew this too. It's the reason 1.1 would implement a pinnacle boss system and other endgame additions, but the foundation of the game felt fantastic, with plenty of room for improvements and further innovations to be made in the coming cycles. Last Epoch, despite its shaky launch and several large blows to its launch day population, had established itself well in the ARPG community. Their communication and understanding of the community's frustrations through all of these events did not go unnoticed, and despite the team still getting their feet under them, most if not all of the major situations were handled with class, and we received literal hourly updates on Twitter, the official forums, and Discord through every outage or issue. So hats off EHG, truly. I hope the communication side of things never stops. It's appreciated having those insights and connections as a player of your game. As I said though, I personally ignored most of the drama that occurred and was just having a good time studying the lore in depth, throwing builds together that I probably shouldn't, and learning the game. The combat felt really good too, and overall it was just an ARPG that really respected your time and was easy for anyone to jump into and have fun with. My understanding of the game had grown a lot over those months, and I, like many others, felt ready and was really looking forward to the next cycle. In the next section, we'll talk about the lead up to and launch of 1.1, after which I'll provide my personal gripes with this patch and the state of the game overall, before closing out the video with some positivity about the future of Last Epoch. On May 10th, patch 1.1 Harbingers of Ruin was teased to resounding praise from the entire ARPG community. And after much anticipation, on July 5th, the 1.1 overview was released. This patch would introduce reworks, balance updates, and bug fixes to classes and skills, as well as an active evade ability for every class to use, available immediately at level 1. The evade ability feels amazing and works flawlessly. I haven't heard a single complaint about it personally, and I absolutely love it. It has no invulnerability frame, so there's no cheesiness or extra skill ceiling to it. Just point and roll. It's great. Patch 1.1 also contained massive new feature additions, including the Nemesis system, which I must say is just so damn good. Way better than a system this simple has any right to be. This is a baseline addition to the game as well, not just a seasonal mechanic. So it's here to stay, and I'm all for it. Easily my favorite thing about patch 1.1 is the Egg of the Forgotten. It allows you to swap a 0 LP unique into the Nemesis system, Or you can just empower the egg and it'll spawn a random empowered unique, the results of which can be really good as well, but it's a bit of a gamble. I've had such good results with the egg, adding multiple LP to things that dropped with none, or just slamming the 0 LP with an amazing legendary affix and saving me a trip to Julra. Future tweaks and balance to this system with room for even more depth to be added is just fantastic. Credit where credit is due. I think everyone agrees that the Nemesis system is absolutely epic. As the name Harbingers of Ruin implies, 1.1 brought us Harbinger bosses to challenge our skills. And finally, 1.1 would bring forth the ultimate challenge, the pinnacle boss fight, Aberoth. Alongside all of that came quality of life updates, Merchant's Guild and Circle of Fortune buffs, new ranks, and so much more. With Aberoth threatening our reality also came a new faction to help us fight him, the Forgotten Knights, led by the original Forgotten Knight of the game and fan favorite, Orinthia. Patch 1.1 was gigantic and contained a lot of necessary improvements, as well as bug fixes and additions to the game. You could really tell that EHG had taken a lot of feedback from the community to heart and implemented it here. The patch was a win, and we were all hyped to try it out and test our mettle against the Harbingers and Aberoth. July 9th arrived and the launch went smoothly, but it wasn't perfect. There were issues with the patch deployment to Steam, causing the download to be unavailable for people. Once that was resolved and the patch became available, we could launch the game. But unfortunately, there were also problems connecting to the online services. Both of these issues were resolved within 30 to 45 minutes, however, and the servers have remained stable ever since. It was a huge improvement over the launch of patch 1.0, but the numbers just weren't quite there. The peak that the game reached on the launch day of patch 1.1 was just under 72,000 players, but to me this seemed a bit low. I'm not sure what kind of numbers EHG had forecast for this cycle, but I truly wonder how many new players joined in for the cycle versus how many were just returning from 1.0. But in any event, 1.1 was underway. On the very first weekend of launch, however, another gold dupe got out. It was brought to EHG's attention and detected and dealt with relatively quickly. They disabled player-to-player trade, which is I guess the method that was being used this time. Judd posted about it to inform the community on Monday, July 15th, and I don't think it had nearly as much of an impact as the 1.0 dupe had, but it was still not something you want to see as a Merchant's Guild player. The economy of a game is pivotal. Any disruption to the economy, regardless of how small, can be extremely detrimental. And then another devastating blow to the hype surrounding Last Epoch. Just over 1 week after the launch of patch 1.1, on July 18th, Path of Exile announced its next big league, patch 3.25 Settlers of Kalgur, the long-awaited and memed-about boat league, full of insane updates and long sought-after changes to the game. Scheduled to be released the following Friday, July 26th. The entire next week to follow was nothing but hype and announcements surrounding Path of Exile's new league. It was all the ARPG scene was talking about, while Last Epoch saw a steady decline in their player base, just 10 days into the patch. Path of Exile was no doubt a driving factor for Last Epoch's decline in player retention here, but I don't believe that unfortunate release timing is entirely responsible for this downward trend. I think that the casual audience has just diminished. The treadmill laid before you at endgame now is an extremely lengthy one, and not in a good way. Even with the corruption quality of life added in patch 1.13, it truly is a daunting grind for a casual gamer. But after a long and arduous grind, I had made it, downing all 10 Harbingers and pushing to over 400 corruption again with fully self-made builds. It was time to fight Aberoth, and he absolutely wiped the floor with my ass. I likely could have overcome this through a battle of attrition and further learning of the mechanics, but it felt pretty hopeless, and I'll get to why. The difficulty had increased drastically, and my build no longer felt up to the task, despite absolutely stomping the Harbingers. My options were essentially gear up further by farming more echoes or even further optimized items. Or as a more nuclear option, I could boot up a new class and mastery entirely. Another roll of the dice on a build and skill choice, starting the endgame over and getting back to where I was on my now bricked build. But again, you don't know if that new build can overcome that wall when the skill and mastery balance is so out of whack. I get that this is the gameplay loop at its core and that it's an ARPG, but the point I'm trying to make is that the grind is just not fun. Even to be able to attempt Aberoth, it's a lot, especially for the average player, let alone a new player trying the game out for the first time. And when you can see the treadmill laid before you, when you can visualize the task that is the grind, the hurdles required, and the journey forward isn't even a guarantee at power gain, your build might just suck. You come to that game over insert coin moment with the screen flashing before you, where you're questioning whether or not you even want to try again, when there's plenty of other games in the arcade. The fun is removed and all you can picture now is the grind. To me, that breaks all motivation. I can't even imagine someone with less of a bias towards this game than I have, going through all of that. Especially if they're trying to go in blind like me and not following a guide of any kind. My time investment no longer felt respected. A mere month into the new content and I was worn down. With Path of Exile still achieving very healthy numbers with their new league, Last Epoch now averages 3,000 to 5,000 concurrent players, with another 2 to 3 months left of development before we even see patch 1.2. I want to get into some of my gripes with this patch and the game state overall as it stands, and we'll close it out with some optimism about the future. Perhaps even you, regardless of what kind of player you are, can resonate with some of these pain points of mine. My first gripe is that enemy damage over time in this game overall feels like it hits you almost instantaneously with its ticks. And the damage isn't smooth at all. It's rapid chunks of very spiky incoming damage. That combined with large hits taken from non-dot sources leads to a very off-putting feeling of health management. It's a detriment to the combat feel overall in my opinion, especially when it's a ground effect and not a debuff that can be cleansed. It feels like there's no counterplay. I think that dot damage inflicted by enemies needs to be tuned down or smoothed out somehow, whether that's through nerfs to enemy damage and scaling in higher corruption levels, or targeting each individual enemy dot effect. I don't know what the best solution is. EHG made a slight fix to a lot of the outliers in patch 1.1.4, but it's still a pain to deal with, not to mention stressful with how quickly your HP is getting chunked. I won't go too deeply into this one as it's just a game feel thing, but I can definitively say it feels bad. But don't just take my word for it. Our buddy Frozen Sentinel once again put out a video recently talking about this exact feeling. In it, he analyzes the damage spikiness of a very sudden death on his hardcore character, finding that the damage ranges of enemy abilities are extremely wide, a bit too wide, leading to very inconsistent damage spikes when hit by damage on the higher end of those thresholds, resulting in deaths that occur so quickly you can't even react as a good player. This type of combat objectively feels bad to anyone, but Frozen actually did the math behind why enemy damage feels so spiky in their video, and he really breaks it down. I'll have a link to that one down in the description, and I highly suggest you check it out if you love numbers. Keep up the fantastic content, Frozen. My second gripe is that my builds and my understanding of the game no longer feels like it's enough to have fun, even after hundreds of hours of investment. Let me explain. I'm not a community tester and I don't hang out in chat rooms for Last Epoch build creation often. I don't stream much if at all or have the time to play every day of the week. I represent the bulk of the player base. I'm a casual, and my time for iteration and experimentation isn't infinite. I likely still play a lot more than the average player even. When spinning up a new build, there are bugs to tiptoe around as well as interactions and mechanics that are unintuitive. The difference between a build I could throw together and an actual meta build, or potentially even a broken build, is night and day. This is the last time I'll be using my boy Frozen to back my points up, but that man is playing 5D chess and I'm playing chutes and ladders. Checkers would be giving me way too much credit. If you compare any of my builds to the latest iteration of Frozen Sentinel's Frostclaw Sorcerer build, we're literally not even playing the same game, and he looks like he's having a ton of fun. I don't think one of my rogue builds would ever end up like this. For me though, simply copying someone else's build stifles creativity and build diversity, something that this game has such a golden opportunity to excel at, and already does in a lot of areas. The punishment for experimentation is just too great. Even with the ability to respec at will, the wind in your sails is still removed when your build fizzles out or hits a wall. All of the skills in the game need to be balanced in such a way that any skill has a shot at greatness, given the right operator and build idea. That's just not the case right now. The power level between a good build and a bad build is massive. A new player shouldn't be able to pick a dud skill that eventually becomes a detriment. There shouldn't be this many back to the drawing board moments in your gameplay, either because the scaling just isn't there or something about it is bugged or it hasn't been updated in years. Those are all unforeseen pitfalls and it feels awful when you stumble into those. A new player should be able to read the tooltips, they should be able to understand the interactions and piece together a successful build on any class with any skill, while using only the in-game resources provided. That was my impression of EHG's original design philosophy. More accessibility and endless replayability. An approachable ARPG. It doesn't feel like a game someone can just hop into right now and be successful without any prior knowledge or handholding, especially at the level that the bar is set at right now, which is exactly what I don't like in Path of Exile right now. Most builds fizzle out around 300 corruption, if not before then, and have trouble dealing with the Harbingers. 300 corruption used to be what EHG would balance around, but the Harbingers and Aberoth have set that bar even higher. When a high ratio of builds that the average player puts together themselves will hit an insurmountable wall, to me the replay value is stifled. Countless skills are drastically undertuned or just feel bad compared to others. Some skill trees and masteries are years behind in terms of development, so choose wisely. To add on to this, you also won't know whether or not your build will make the cut until you're at least into empowered monoliths. Leveling up and going through the normal monoliths is doable for nearly any build, even absolute memes. So you're potentially baited all the way to endgame thinking your build is fine, easily making it through the campaign and normal monoliths. Once you get into empowered monoliths, the difficulty curve trends drastically upwards, and it doesn't stop as you push your corruption level higher and eventually start fighting Harbingers and even Aberoth. It's just a bit much, and a bad build will just fall apart completely. It's not a smooth or gradual difficulty trend at all. This feels terrible as a player with limited time to play, iterate, and experiment. A player that just wanted to play X, Y, or Z skill, or fulfill a class fantasy. I'm not saying make the game easy, but it needs to be more accessible. Frozen Sentinel, Perry the Pig, Dreadful, and other Gigabrain build creators are an anomaly, the 1%. They have such an in-depth mechanical understanding of the game, and they actually have the time for iteration and experimentation on their builds, due to the amount of time that they're able to play. They know what skills to avoid like the plague and what to potentially build around. This is not the case for the other 99% of your player base. Without watching YouTube videos or reading Reddit or Discord, no average player, let alone a new player of Last Epoch, will know what skills to avoid and what skills to pick for success. I do enjoy Last Epoch's ease of respeccing your characters, but unless you've been collecting gear for several different build possibilities, or you've been playing a while and have a stash full of exalted items to play around with, you can't just take a failed build and immediately respec and re-gear it to try again. Unless perhaps you're in Merchant's Guild, but that would still be pretty costly. And does the average player actually plan a backup build or have the ability to pivot on the fly like that? Nearly all of the folks I've spoken with about their gripes with 1.1 say that they just turn the Harbingers off, which is essentially like playing Last League plus Nemesis. Driving home my point here one last time, it shouldn't be this easy to fail. All skills need appropriate balance and functionality, especially for new players that want to blindly give the game a go. This is a time thing that I have faith EHG will sort out, and it's not made this way maliciously. Masteries and skills will be updated and reworked, and balance should continue to improve as well. But I still feel the need to voice my frustrations here with this false sense of build diversity that the game gives off right now. It's fantastic that there's so many skills and uniques to build around, but depending on the skill or mastery you choose, or potentially the unique you want to build around, you may be set up for failure unknowingly, due to bugs and balance. It shouldn't feel like a massive roll of the dice. Some classes like my beloved Marksman just need reworked entirely. I personally feel that the game and skills should be fun and rewarding first, and tuned for competitiveness later. I sincerely hope that arena integrity and other competitive areas of the game don't prevent EHG from making these skills and items more fun, because absolutely insane screen-wide clearing shit in an ARPG is exactly what people want to play. Performance may be the key limiting factor here, I'm not sure, I'm not a dev. But anyway, these are my two biggest gripes. Dot damage needs further adjusted, and ground AoE dots are even more of a nuisance. And as Frozen Sentinel mathed out, the damage spikiness in this game is just not comfortable to say the least, even on tanky characters. Skills, masteries, and uniques need huge overhauls and balancing in order for the game to feel less punishing for picking the wrong one. Before we wrap up the video, I'm curious. For those of you that played Last Epoch this patch, did you manage to kill Aberoth? And for anyone at EHG listening, who is this aspirational content intended for? Between the lengthy grind into and through empowered monoliths and the jagged difficulty spikes we now experience, it doesn't seem very accessible to me for casuals and newer players of your game. Alright, let's wrap up the video with a few more positives about 11th Hour Games and look towards the bright future of Last Epoch that's easily within grasp. Overall, as I've said throughout this video, my thoughts and sentiments about the game as a whole are mostly positive. Despite low initial numbers at the beginning of this cycle, and less than a handful of weeks of solid player retention, 11th Hour Games are innovators in this genre, and they're not done impressing. The foundational game itself, the shell that they've built, is bustling with potential. As long as 11th Hour Games keeps making a fun game at the heart of their development of Last Epoch, with their community's sentiments in mind through it all, I personally think the game is just going to get better with every cycle. I have high hopes for it as it continues to be developed. They already have a roadmap out teasing the next 3 cycles, which is at least the next 8 to 9 plus months of development. With every patch is a new opportunity, And I don't think EHG has many hills that they're willing to die on if something is causing that much player friction. So be vocal. I'll have a link to the feedback and suggestions forum for Last Epoch down in the description. If you've played the game and bounced off but are still curious about the game's development, let your frustrations be heard. EHG truly is listening. Their aim is to make a great game, and they're well on their way in doing that already in my opinion. I have nothing but good things to say about the company of 11th Hour Games, and that's why my negative feelings towards this patch and the gripes that I laid out are so egregious to me. They seem completely opposite of EHG's core philosophy of an accessible and fun ARPG that they've had since that 2018 Kickstarter. And I think that's about enough out of me. If you made it this far into the video, thanks so much for listening. I have a few questions for you and I'll respond to anyone that takes the time to comment. Did any of my points here resonate with you? And are you as hopeful for the future of Last Epoch as I am? Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to my channel if you want more documentaries, game reviews, and lore. Thank you all. Stay safe, have fun, and I'll see you all in the next video. Farewell.